You're standing in the emergency room at midnight. Your phone is buzzing in your hand and you're staring at the name of a second cousin on the screen. You pick up and you hear the words that change your week. Your uncle just passed away. He didn't have a wife. He didn't have kids. And right now, that cousin is asking you what happens to his house, his truck, and the money in his bank account. You've no idea. Nobody does. You're searching on your phone at 11 at night because the coroner just left and you're suddenly realizing you've to figure out the estate. Your uncle didn't leave behind a will. In the law, we call this dying intestate. Intestate simply means you pass away without a valid will, so the state steps in and decides who gets your stuff. People think if you don't write a will, the government just swoops in and takes everything. That's a myth. The state doesn't keep your money, but the state does dictate the exact sequence of events. There's a very specific step-by-step machine that starts turning the second someone passes without a will. And right now, I'm going to walk you through exactly how that machine works. Remember, as we go through this, that state laws vary heavily. Every state has its own rulebook, but the general mechanics are exactly the same across the board. This is education, not legal advice for your specific situation. The very first thing that has to happen is someone has to open the estate. An estate is just the legal word for everything the person owned and everything they owed when they died. Think of it as a temporary financial container. When you die without a will, there's no named executor. An executor is the person a will names to handle the cleanup process. Without a will, someone has to volunteer. Usually, it's the closest living relative. That person has to go down to the local courthouse and file a petition. A petition is just a formal written request asking a judge to do something. You're asking the judge to officially open the estate and appoint you as the administrator. An administrator is the same thing as an executor, but instead of being chosen by the person who died, you're chosen by the judge. Once you're officially appointed as the administrator, you get letters of administration. These are official court documents that prove to banks and businesses that you've the legal authority to act on behalf of the dead person. You'll take these letters down to the bank to freeze the account so nobody else can touch them. You'll take them to the DMV to handle the truck. You'll take them to the utility company to shut off the power. Without these letters, you can't do anything. If you're handling this, you've to secure the property right away. You've to change the locks on the house and make sure the insurance doesn't lapse. Now we move to the second part of the process. Before anyone gets a single dime from the estate, you've to pay off the debts. Let's say your uncle owed $10,000 on a credit card. You've to notify the credit card company that he passed away. They submit a formal claim to the estate. A claim is just a written demand for payment. You use the money in his bank account to pay off that credit card. People get terrified here because they think they have to pay their dead relatives' debts out of their own pocket. You don't. You can't inherit debt. Debt stays with the estate. If the estate runs out of money before the debts are paid, the creditors are out of luck. The relatives just walk away clean. But this is exactly why you must follow the legal steps and get appointed by the court. If you just take your uncle's truck and drive it around without legally opening the estate, the credit card company can sue you directly. They can claim you interfered with their ability to get paid. As long as you go through the proper channels and pay the valid debts from the estate funds first, you're completely protected. You handled the taxes. Yes, even death doesn't get you out of taxes. You've to file a final personal income tax return for the person who passed away. You're covering the period from January 1st up to the exact date they died. If they owed income taxes, that gets paid out of the estate just like the credit cards. Some states also have an inheritance tax or an estate tax. An inheritance tax is a tax on the person receiving the money. An estate tax is a tax on the total value of everything the person owned before it gets distributed. The rules on these taxes vary wildly depending on where you live and how much money we're talking about. Most ordinary, everyday estates don't hit the federal threshold, but you still have to check your local state laws to be absolutely certain you're clear before you start handing out cash. Once the debts are cleared and the taxman is satisfied, we finally reach step 4. This is where we distribute the remaining assets. Assets are just things that hold value, like cash, houses, and vehicles. Since there's no will to say who gets what, the state uses a rigid legal formula called intestate succession. Intestate succession is a family tree, and the law dictates exactly who gets a share. It leaves absolutely zero room for arguing. If you have a surviving spouse, they get the lion's share. In many states, if you're married and all your children are from that same spouse, the spouse gets everything. If you've kids from a previous relationship, the state might split the assets between the current spouse and those kids. If you aren't married, the assets go entirely to your children. If you don't have children, it goes to your parents. If your parents aren't alive, it trickles down to your siblings. Remember that second cousin who called you? They only get a piece of the pie if there's no surviving spouse, no kids, no parents, and no siblings. The law favors the closest bloodline. If a sibling died before your uncle, that sibling's kids, your nieces and nephews, might step into their parents' share. This is called the right of representation. It just means descendants stand in for their dead parent when the inheritance trickles down. You don't get to decide that your hardworking niece deserves the house and your lazy nephew gets nothing. The law treats them exactly the same. They split it right down the middle. This strict formula is exactly why dying without a will creates so many family wars. Without a document spelling out exact wishes, the court relies entirely on the generic statute. I've seen families rift apart over a used fishing boat because there was no will to say who it belonged to. The law doesn't care about who actually helped mow the lawn or who visited the hospital. The law only cares about biological and legal connections. Now, let's talk about the fifth and final step. The administrator has to go back to the judge and close the estate. You've to provide an accounting. An accounting is a detailed financial record showing every penny that came into the estate and every penny that went out. The judge reviews this to make sure you didn't pocket the cash and that you paid all the legitimate bills. Once the judge approves the accounting, they officially close the estate. The administrator is released from their duties. The temporary legal container is destroyed, and the heirs walk away with their inheritance free and clear. If you're the person standing in the middle of this mess right now, you need to know when to get a lawyer. If the estate is just a small bank account, some states have a simplified process called a small estate affidavit. An affidavit is just a sworn written statement. You sign it in front of a notary, hand it to the bank, and they release the funds without a judge. But if we're talking about a house, a business, or a pile of debt, you shouldn't try to be your own lawyer. You've to find a local probate attorney. Probate is just the legal word for the entire court-supervised process of distributing property after someone passes. The lawyer's fees are paid out of the estate, not out of your personal pocket. A local lawyer keeps you from getting sued by angry relatives and makes sure you dot every single legal line correctly. What is the one sentimental item in your family that would cause a massive fight if someone passed away without a will? Tell me about it in the comments. If this breakdown helped you understand the hidden legal machine that takes over when a relative leaves this earth, pass the video along to a coworker or family member who might be the one making the midnight phone calls for your family. Make sure you subscribe to Scribble Law so you always know the exact rules before a massive bureaucratic process tries to blindside your family.